Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph 33a of Maseches Kiddushin. Starting from the second line of the page, at the end of the line, the Gemara is examining the Brisa that it brought on the previous Amud, the previous page, discussing the requirement to stand for an elder, for an older person, and for a Torah scholar. We had different opinions. One opinion was that you only need to stand if it's both an older person and a Torah scholar. One opinion was that you would have to stand even if it was just a Torah scholar, even if he wasn't older. One opinion was that you would have to stand for any older person. So, and the Brisa discussed different scenarios, which now the Gemara will elaborate on. So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, the master said, meaning the Brisa said the following. The Brisa said, Yachol yehadrenu b'mamon. I might think that the requirement learned from the verse that we were discussing was mipnei seva takum, you should stand for someone who's older, v'hadarta pnei zaken, and bring glory to the face and honor to the face of a zaken, which we explained to mean a scholar. So the Gemara, the Brisa said that you might think that yehadrenu b'mamon, that the obligation to bring honor is even at your expense with money. Talmud Lomar, that's why the Torah says, takum v'hadarta. It puts the word takum, stand, right next to the word bring honor, to teach me that makima she'en bach yisarim kis, just like when it says to stand for him, there's no loss of money involved. Af hider she'en bach yisarim kis. So too, when it says to honor the person, it means in a way, but that you are not required to actually incur a loss. The Gemara asks, V'kima les bach yisarim kis? Does standing for someone not involve losing money? The Torah implies that you always have to stand, even in a scenario where you might lose money, and I could come up with a scenario where standing for an elder will involve a loss of money. Milo askinan, aren't we speaking even in the case, dikanakim marganisa, that the person has a job of making holes in jewels, he's a diamond worker, he's involved in something where every moment you have the opportunity to make more money. And when he stands for his elder, or for the scholar, or whoever he's standing for, he's actually losing money. But the implication is that he's required to do that. Because it says takum, it says stand, it doesn't give any exceptions. So even in a case where there's a loss of money. So if that's true, right, if he's nakim marganisa, he could be carving jewels, and adahachi v'achi kayim yikameyu batam melachto. And while this is going on, while this person walks by, he has to stand up. He's going to be unable to work, and he's going to lose money. So there is a case of standing that loses money. So we shouldn't be able to say anymore, just like standing, there's no loss of money. So too, the honor, when it says to honor him, it's without a loss of money. There could be a loss of money when standing. So maybe when honoring also, we have to lose money. We're required to do so even if we're to incur a loss. So the Gemara says, Ella, so rather, how do I know that that's not the case? How do I know that I don't have to incur a loss? Ella akish kima lehider. Because we juxtapose and compare them the other direction. The standing we can learn from the honoring. It says, takum, stand v'hadarta, and bring honor. And I'm going to learn about standing from bringing honor. That ma hider she'en bo bittul, just like when it says to honor, the implication is it's more of a passive thing. Bring honor to him, but not in such a way that you have to break from doing your work. Rashi says the language of hider is to bring glory, nisius panim, showing your face to him, raising your face. It could be with money, it could be with honor, meaning, well, I guess nisius panim is more like, raising his face, meaning raising his honor, whether it's through money, whether it's through words, but not through action, really. That's the implication of the word hider, of bringing honor, in the understanding of the Gemara. So there's no bittul malacha. There you're not taking a break from work. There's no requirement for that. There's a requirement to bring honor to the person in a more passive way. So just like there's no bittul malacha, you don't have to take a break from work, Af kima shengbo bita mulacha. So too, when it says to stand, you only have to stand if you're not going to have to take a break from work. But you would not have to take a break from work to stand. That's what we're going to learn from hider to kima. When it says to honor, to standing. Just like honoring is without breaking from work, so to standing is without breaking from work. And now that I know that kima is without having to take a break from work, so then I know that there's no scenario where standing is going to incur a loss of money. So therefore, I go back the other way now. Ve'akish nami hider lekima, and now I can compare the honoring to the standing. Ma kima she'en bo chisaron kis. Just like standing does not incur a loss of money, af hider she'en bo chisaron kis. So too, honoring would not be required where there would be a loss of money. So I'm using honoring to teach me that I don't have to take a break from work. And once I know I don't have to take a break from work, so then there's no case of standing that involves a loss of money. So I'll learn from standing, where there's no loss of money, to honoring that there doesn't have to be a loss of money. Mikan from here they said, Ein bale umnios resha'in ulamon v'nei talmidei chachamim b'shah she'oskim b'melachtam. The Gemara says from here they said that people who are working are not allowed to stand for scholars when they're working. They're not allowed to stand. Now, what does it mean they're not allowed to stand? If they want to take a break from work, they should be allowed to take a break from work. So Tosfos says it means if they're working for someone else. If they're working for someone else, they're getting paid, they can't take a break. Because that's not a reason to allow to take a break. Alternatively, Tosfos says it just means that they don't have to. What it really means is they don't have to stand. From here we know that workers don't have to stand for a Talmid Chacham, for a scholar, because they don't have to incur a loss of money in order to honor the scholar. Asks the Gemara, V'lo, really? They don't have to? V'hatnan, but we're learning a Mishnah. The Mishnah speaks about people who are bringing Bikurim. People are bringing their first fruits to Yerushalayim, the special mitzvah of Bikurim. It says, Kol Baalei Omnios Omdim Mipneiim. When they pass through the streets of Jerusalem, the Baalei Omnios, the shopkeepers, the workers, stand before them, the Mishnah says. V'shalim v'shlomim, and they ask how they're doing. V'omrim lahem, and they say to them, Acheinu, our brothers, Anshe Makom Ploni, men from such a place, Boachem l'shalom, come in peace. They give a beautiful greeting to them. So that's for the people bringing Bikurim. And the Gemara seems to assume if the workers have to stand for the people bringing Bikurim, then they should also have to stand for Torah scholars. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Mipneihem omdim. No, they have to stand for the people bringing Bikurim. Mipnei talmidei chachamim ein omdim. But for scholars, they don't have to stand. No, don't assume, don't apply one to the other. It's not true. They have to stand for the people bringing Bikurim, but they do not have to stand for the scholars. People, again, if people are in the middle of working, they don't have to stand for Torah scholars. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Avin. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin said about this, he said, Bo re'ei, come and see kama chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. How wonderful, how dear is a mitzvah in its proper time. While they're involved in the mitzvah of Bikurim here, how dear is such a mitzvah? Sharei mipneiim omdim. For look, we say the workers should stand up for them. Mipnei talmidei chachamim ein omdim. While they don't have to stand for Torah scholars, even though Torah scholars certainly deserve tremendous honor, and the Torah accords them great honor, and normally you do have to stand, but a worker doesn't have to stand for them. So you see, and yet we stand for people bringing Bikurim, says Rabbi Yossi bar Avin. You see how wonderful and beautiful a mitzvah in its proper time is, that the workers have to stand for those who are involved in this mitzvah. The Gemara says, no, you don't necessarily see that. Vidilma shani hasam. Maybe there it's different. Maybe that which we stand for people bringing Bikurim is not because of this idea of chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, how dear is a mitzvah in its time. Rather, it's dim kain, or dim lo kain, if they wouldn't stand. Nimtzeis ata machshilan la'asid lavo. It will turn out that you are tripping them up for the future. Meaning, if you don't accord these people bringing the Bikurim the proper honor, they may not do it again in the future. Rashi says that they're not going to bring it next time because they'll say, "Oh, we're disgraceful in the eyes of the people of Jerusalem. They don't feel the need to stand for us." Now, why would we have to give them this honor? Like, why would they feel that way? So somebody explains, I saw brought down, that they would dress up the Bikurim. They dress up their animals. They would their carriages. They make a big deal about it. The people bringing the Bikurim to show how dear the mitzvah was. If the people of Yerushalayim wouldn't respond accordingly and afford them kavod and honor as a result, so it would be disappointing, and the people would be, would think twice about doing it again the next time. It would be discouraging for them. So maybe the Gemara is saying, maybe that's why we stand for them, so they don't get discouraged, so that they keep on doing this. It's hard work. You have to bring the Bikurim from wherever you live. And this way they'll continue to do it, and they'll continue to do it in a beautiful way. But you don't necessarily see the concept of Chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, how dear is a mitzvah in its proper time, because maybe that's not why they're standing. Amar Mar, the master said. So another quote from the Brisa from the previous page. The Brisa said, Yachol yamon mipana mibeis hakisei, mibeis hamerchatz. You might think that you have to stand for an older person or for a Torah scholar, even if you are in the bathroom or in the bathhouse. And the Gemara said, the Brisa said, no, you don't. Right? It's only takum v'hadarta. Stand and give honor. You only stand where there's honor, but in the bathroom there's no honor to stand for someone. The Gemara asks the lo, really, there isn't? One time Rabbi Chia was sitting in the bathhouse, and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, passed by. And Rabbi Chia didn't stand for him. And Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe took offense. He was makbid. He cared. He got upset. The Asa Amar Leila Avua, and he came and he told his father, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, that Shnei Chumshim Shanisi Lo b'Sefer Tehillim. I taught him 2/5 of the book of Tehillim. V'lo aman mipanai, and yet he didn't stand for me. So Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe says, I don't get it. Rabbi Chia didn't stand for me. I taught him Torah. He should stand for me. Now, was he makbid? Was he upset for himself? Seemingly not. It's kavod Torah. It's the honor of Torah. He's not honoring his teacher. Visu, and furthermore, bar kapara. Another person, V'amri Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi. Some say it wasn't bar kapara, it was Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi. Havayasa be maschusa. He was sitting in the bathhouse. And all of Azal Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. And again, Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe came. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. V'lo kami kameh. And this person in the bathhouse, bar kapara, or Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi, didn't stand for Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. V'ikbid. And Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe was makbid. He was upset. V'asa amar le'avu. And he came and he told his father, Shnei shlishay shlish anisi lo b'taras kanim. I taught him 2/3 of a third. In other words, 2/9 of Taras Kanim, of the Medrash on Sefer Vayikra. V'lo aman mipanai, and he didn't stand for me. So I'm his teacher, and he didn't stand for me. V'amar lo, so Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi responded, Shema bohem yoshiv maharher. Maybe he was thinking about it. Maybe he was sitting and learning what you had taught him, and that's why he didn't stand for you. He didn't realize you were there. Now, says the Gemara, Taima de Bahem Yoshev Mahar. We can deduce from Rebbe's words, from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's words, that the only excuse was because he was distracted, he was involved sitting and thinking about the words that he had learned. Halav hachi. But if not for that, well, then he wouldn't have an excuse, and we would expect him to have stood. So here's where we have our question from, because here we're talking about in a bathhouse. So we see that even though it's a bathhouse, there is an expectation that he stand for him. There's an expectation that he stand for him. So the Gemara says, Lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Meaning our Brisa said that you don't have, in a bathhouse you don't have to stand. This story seems to indicate that you do. Says the Gemara, Lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Ha bivati gavai, ha bivati barai. It depends which room in the bathhouse. The Brisa, which said you don't stand, that was in the inner rooms, where people are already unclothed. Ha bivati barai, this story happened in the outer rooms, in the waiting room or the entrance room, where people are still clothed. There's still an expectation that one stand to honor their teacher. And hachanami mistabra, and really that's logical to make that suggestion based on the story, because otherwise there's a problem with the story. Rabba Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, B'kol makom mutter laharer. You're allowed to think in words of Torah anywhere, chutz, except for mi beis hamerchotz and beis hakisei, except for in a bathroom, a bathhouse, like a bathroom. So you're not allowed to think in Torah in a bathhouse, and that means in the inner room of a bathhouse. But in the outer rooms you could. So now the story makes more sense. If the story took place in the inner rooms, then why would Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi say maybe he was thinking in Torah? He's not allowed to think in Torah there. He couldn't have been distracted by his Torah thoughts. He's not allowed to think in Torah there. So it must be the story happened in the outer room. So now it makes sense. Now everything makes sense. Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe passed by, and these different rabbis didn't care up for him, even though he had taught them. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, this is the outer room. You're right, they are obligated in the outer room to stand for you, but they may be distracted because they're thinking about what you taught them. They're thinking words of Torah. And the brisa that said that you don't stand in the bathhouse, that's in the inner room of the bathhouse. However, the Gemara says, you can't necessarily prove this point from the story, because Dilma la'on seishani, maybe when it's against your will, it's different, meaning the suggestion is they were too distracted by what they were learning in their heads. Okay, that's possible that happened inside the bathhouse also, even though they're not allowed to, you're not supposed to thinking learning, but sometimes we can't control our thoughts, and if they're so involved in the learning, then they might have thought in learning in the bathhouse. Meaning, the Gemara's distinction can still be true, that you are required to stand in the outer room of the bathhouse, you're not required to stand in the inner room of the bathhouse, but just the proof from the story isn't necessarily a proof, because even though Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said that they must have been thinking and learning, thinking in Torah thoughts, but that doesn't prove that they were in the outer room, because maybe they were thinking in Torah thoughts in the inner room, and still, even though they're not supposed to, but they did, because sometimes you can't control your thoughts. So that's where the Gemara concludes. But it seems that the stands in the inner room you are not expected to stand. In the outer room you would be expected to stand. Now the Gemara now quotes the next part of the Brisa. The Brisa had said, Yachol yatzim einav k'misha lo ra'ahu. The Brisa said, you might think that you can close your eyes and pretend that you didn't see the person, the older person, or the Talmid Chacham. The Brisa said, no, the Torah says, takum v'yaresa. It says, takum v'yaresa. You should stand and v'yaresa, and fear your God. The end of the verse said, fear God, because God knows if you saw him. So, don't pretend that you didn't see him. Says the Gemara, Atu b'Rishi askinan? Are we dealing with Rishayim? Is the Torah coming to tell you don't be a Rasha? Torah tells you the laws. So the Torah says you should stand. And then what? And then the Torah says, and don't pretend that you didn't see him? That's obvious. We're not dealing with a Rasha. The Torah doesn't have to say, if you're so wicked that you want to, even though you have an obligation to stand, you're not going to, well, we'll tell you again to stand. That doesn't make sense. So, how do we understand it? What's the Brisa telling us then? If it's not telling us this, if it's not telling us don't pretend that you don't see him. Ella, rather, Yachol Yatzim Einam Mikamei Delimte Zman Chiyuva. Maybe the Bryce is saying as follows. You might think that you can close your eyes before the time of obligation comes upon you. Dikimata Zman Chiyuva Halo Chazile. Because then when the obligation comes, you don't see him in such a way that you'll stand before him. In other words, you're not actually obligated to stand for him unless he's within 4 amos, 4 cubits. So maybe you might think that you could close your eyes before he comes within 4 cubits, because then I never became obligated. I don't even know if he's within 4 cubits. Right? He sees him coming. So right now I'm not obligated to stand for him. He's too far away. So I'll close my eyes, and now I don't even know when he comes within 4 cubits. I never know when the obligation arrives upon me. So you might think that that's okay because you never became, it's not like you're transgressing your obligation, you never became obligated because you don't even know if he came within 4 cubits. Talmud Lomar, Takum V'Aresa. That's why the Torah says, no, you should still have fear of God, and Talmud Lomar, Takum V'Aresa, that Hashem knows your thoughts, and He understands you're trying to get out of the mitzvah. Don't do that. Don't get out of the mitzvah. If there's a mitzvah that's coming your way, and it's true, you would kind of have a way that you could avoid it by closing your eyes, and then you won't ever become obligated. The Torah says don't do that. Don't try to avoid the obligation from coming upon you. Okay. Which I think is in general a good lesson, right? That don't avoid the opportunities for mitzvahs. Look at them as opportunities. We sometimes don't want to have to take responsibility to help someone, or to honor someone. This is telling us no. Don't try to get out of it. Hashem knows that you're trying to avoid it, and that's not what Hashem wants from us. Okay. Tana, it was taught. Ezoi kima sheyesh bahidr. We said that when the person's too far away, you're not obligated to stand because there's no hidr in that. It's standing, but there's no hidr, there's no honor because he's too far away. So at what point, says the Gemara, is it considered an honor to stand for them? Ezoi kima sheyesh bahidr. What standing has honor as well? When is it that if you stand it will be obvious that you're honoring the person? If he's too far away, it's not clear that you're honoring them. At what point is it clear that you're honoring them, that the obligation sets in? It's within 4 amos. That's the line. 4 cubits, about 6 to 8 feet. Amar Abaye says, Lo amran ala birabo she'ena muvak. Now this idea that you don't have to stand for someone unless they're within 4 amos, that's only for your teacher who's not your set teacher. He's not your Rebbe Muvhak. He's not your established teacher. Aval berabo ha-muvhak. But if it's your set teacher, your established teacher, your Rebbe, Milo Einav, as soon as he's within eyesight, you stand for him. That's what Abaye says. And indeed, Abaye miki avachazi le'udne dechamra de Rabbi Yosef ta'asi. Abaye's Rebbe was Rabbi Yosef. When he would see the ear of Rav Yosef's donkey come into view, Havakayim, he would stand. So as soon as even before Rav Yosef came into view, just the ear of Rav Yosef's donkey, Abaye would stand. Abaye habarachim chamra. One time Abaye was riding a donkey, V'kamaski aguda nahar Sagya, and he was going along the bank of the river Sagya. Yosef Rav Mesharshi of Rabban B'idach Kisra. Rav Mesharshi and other rabbis were sitting on the other side of the river. V'lokamu mikame, and they didn't stand for Abaye, even though Abaye was their Rebbe, I guess, as we're about to see. He was on this side of the river, and they were on the other side. They didn't stand for him. Amar lahu, he said to them, V'lav Rav Muvakana, am I not your set teacher? You're supposed to stand for your set teacher. Now again, we should just keep in mind, these Torah scholars demanding that others honor them, they're not looking for their own honor. They're looking for honor of Torah. You have to honor Torah. So Amrulay, they said to him, Lavadaita, we didn't realize. We didn't realize that either that it was you or that you were on this other, that you were there even. We didn't realize that we needed to stand. Okay, but in general, we're learning that one should stand for an elder person or for a Torah scholar when they're within 4 amos. Like if it's the Rebbe Muvak, if it's the set teacher, even once they come within eyesight. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Reb Shimon ben Elazar said, this is also quoted in the Brisa, Minayin lizakein shelo yatriach. How do we know that the older person should not trouble people? Meaning he should try to avoid making people stand for him and go around. Talmud Lomar zakein v'aresa, because the Torah says a zakein, a scholar, v'aresa, he should have fear of heaven. That the scholar or the older person should have fear of heaven to try not to make people stand for them. Meaning, don't put people in the position that they're required to stand for you. Amar Abaye says, Naktinan, we learn, De'imakif chayi. If he circumvents the people, he lives a long life. There's a reward for a person who avoids the honor and goes around to avoid people standing for him. Chayi, he lives long. Abaye makif, this is what Abaye would do. Abaye would go around. So even though in the other story he was on the other side of the river, he was expecting people to stand, that's because it happened already. Once he passes them, there's an expectation to stand. But he would try to avoid people having to stand for him. Rabbi Zera makif. Rabbi Zera also would go around. Fine. Ravina hava Yasif kamed Rabbi Yirmiyah midifti. One time Ravina was sitting in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah from Difti. Chalafu gavra kameh. A certain man passed them. V'lo michsi reishan. He didn't have his head covered. He didn't have a yarmulke. Amar. So Ravina said, Kama chatzif hagavra. How rude is this person? It's disrespectful before Torah scholars to walk with your head uncovered. Amar le. So Rav Yirmiyah Medifti responded, Dilma mimasa machasyan. Maybe he's from the city of Masa Machasya, which was a very big city. Degisi barabanan, that they're loaded with rabbis. They have so many rabbanan there. He's just used to rabbanan being around. He's become desensitized. He lost his respect for them. They're too common for him, and that's why he's not standing. It doesn't sound like this is a real justification. He's just trying to explain the man's behavior, but it seems that there was an expectation here that he should cover his head in front of Torah scholars. Okay, then the Brisa had said, Isi ben Yehuda Omer. Isi ben Yehuda says, Mipnei seva takum, should stand for someone who's old. Vafilu kol seva v'mashma, anybody who's old. Not just a Torah scholar, but anybody who's old. Isi ben Yehuda says you should stand for them in respect. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Halacha ki Isi ben Yehuda. The halacha is like Isi ben Yehuda. One is required to stand for an old person, even if they're not a Torah scholar. Rabbi Yochanan Avakai Mikamei Sabi Darmai. Rabbi Yochanan would stand even in front of Aramean old men. Meaning, even in front of non-Jewish old men, he would stand. So it's, the halacha, generally these types of halachos are specific to Jews. In terms of they say takum, it's talking about within our people. But Rabbi Yochanan extended it even to non-Jews. Amar, he said, Kamahar patki adu alayhu. He said, how many harpatki have passed over these people? Harpatki, Rashi says, means occurrences, challenges, miracles. They've experienced so much in life. They've been through so much. They've seen so much. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan said we should afford them honor. Even though they weren't Jewish, they were Arameans, but he still felt that they should be honored. Rava mekom lokai hider avadalu. Rava was kind of in the middle. Rava wouldn't stand for non-Jewish elders, but he would still accord them respect. He would give them the respect like that, the leaning forward. He would get out of his seat a little bit and still give them hider, still give them honor. Abaye Yahiv Yada Sabi. Abaye would extend his hand to help a Sabi, to help an old man walk. And again, it sounds like this wasn't a Jewish old man, and Abaye would help him walk, or old men in general. He would help them walk. Rava Mishad Shluchi. Rava wouldn't do it himself. He was a Torah scholar. He felt that it wasn't honorable for a Torah scholar, but he would send a messenger to it. He would send somebody to do it. So he would make sure it was taken care of, that these old people got their help, but he felt he shouldn't do it himself. Rav Nachman Mishader Guzay. Rav Nachman also wouldn't go himself. He would send his guards. Rav Nachman was in charge of the courts, and he had enforcers that would walk with him, and he sent them to help with when he saw an old man who needed help. Amar, he said, the reason why he couldn't go himself, he said, Ilav Torah, if not for the Torah that I have, Kama Nachman bar Abba Ika b'shukah. How many Nachman bar Abbas would there be in the marketplace? Meaning, I'm the same as everybody else, so technically I could do it, but there's a big difference, which is my Torah. And so, it's not because of me, but because of the honor of my Torah, so I shouldn't be servicing others in this way, especially one who I'm not obligated to service, and they should service him for his Torah, but he still would make sure it was taken care of. He would send people to still help the older people. So it's the type of situation where, it's efshar al yedei acherim. We say if it's possible for others to do it, it's better for others to do it. In this situation where Rav Nachman was this great Torah scholar, Rava, so that's how they felt. On the other hand, it says Abaye would help on his own, and we saw Rabbi Yochanan would even stand for them. So we see this idea, these Amoraim, these scholars of the Gemara, are affording respect not only to elderly Jews, but even to elderly Gentiles.